The following is a weather special from your First Alert Weather Team. Hurricane Season 2026, sponsored by Arbor Tree Care.
Welcome. Hurricane season is upon us.
Yeah, and your First Alert Weather Team is here to help you prepare.
But as we all know too well, it only takes one storm to leave a lasting impact.
Well, I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Michaels.
And I'm Meteorologist Jordan Smith.
And I'm Meteorologist Emmett Rice. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, well, this season is expected to be dominated a little bit by El Nino. And when it comes to the hurricane season forecast, NOAA has actually released their numbers for a below or near normal season here across the Panhandle. Guys, look at the number of storms that they're predicting compared to average.
Yeah, I mean, your average is 14, so they're expecting 8 to 14. So as you said, I mean, if we can stay closer to that 8, I mean, I don't think anybody will complain. But hey, I mean, it's a pretty good outlook for sure.
Yeah, certainly that El Nino forecast, it is good to see.
Yeah, and when it comes down to the breakdown of how the NOAA looks at and the Hurricane Center looks at the season, 55% of the forecast is actually calling for below average or near normal at 35%. If you add up all that, that's 90% chance that the season actually winds up either below average or near normal for us. So certainly looking like it won't be as active because of El Nino patterns here across a lot of the Atlantic. And let's talk a little bit about how El Nino actually affects the weather forecast for us and the upcoming pattern that we'll see across the open waters of the Atlantic. It actually has to do with the Pacific. You watch where warm water upwells across the Pacific, and when it gets to the eastern equatorial Pacific, that actually does something to trade winds. Trade winds actually get a little bit stronger, which impact the jet stream, and pushing the jet stream, subtropical jet that is, a little further up towards the north can sometimes lead towards pretty heavy shower and thunderstorm activity across the southwest U.S. and northern Mexico. But that jet stream also is a river of fast-moving air in the atmosphere, which creates higher shear. Shear, a detrimental factor to developing systems. And when it comes to the El Nino forecast and breakdown, the way it's looking like maybe starting to take shape in the early portions of summer, but really starting to build and grow and become a stronger El Nino, meaning higher wind shear across the Atlantic waters, which would be detrimental to the season, and developing systems right during the peak of those hurricane season number of storms and activity through August and September, when we see the most named storms in a season. So as the El Nino system builds during the peak of season, we might not see as many storms developing when we tend to see most of them take shape. What we're going to do is head over to meteorologist Jordan Smith, and Jordan's going to explain how hurricanes actually take shape.
Yeah, no, we live in the hurricane capital of the world, but like, do you know exactly how hurricanes form? Well, let's go over exactly so you know what to expect when you start to see those forecasts start to come up into the area. Well, you got to have unstable air, and you got to have temps cool with hot. Okay, so that unstable air, that will lead to some convection, and as all that convection starts to go up, that moist air at around 1,500 feet or so will allow for some thunderstorm activity to begin to take place. And then the velocity of the winds must not change significantly with hot. That velocity helps kind of steer those winds around. This is the magic number. 80 is the magic number for the water temperatures. Ocean temperatures must be at 80 or above to supply enough energy to sustain a tropical storm or hurricane. So exactly when you're dealing with those, you start out with a tropical depression. That is the lowest of tropical storms, or tropical systems. That is organized clouds and thunderstorms and circulation with winds less than 38 miles an hour. Most of the time, these kind of give you some of those bigger rainfall storms that we are dealing with. The next step up, that goes to tropical storm. That's when a storm gets its name. You know, we have the names of hurricanes. Depressions do not get named. Tropical storms and hurricanes do. A tropical storm is organized storms and with circulation winds 39 miles an hour to up to 73. That can lead to some minor storm surge. That can lead to some minor wind damage and also some big time flooding events as well. If you're going to get a hurricane, that is when intense organized tropical thunderstorms begin to take place. That is very strong circulation up ahead, and that is winds that is 74 miles an hour or greater. And then, of course, we know it goes all the way from a Category 1 all the way up to a Category 5. And we're going to bring in meteorologist Emmett Rice, and he is going to explain those different levels of hurricanes. Emmett?
Yeah, that's right. When we get that hurricane to form, the one way we measure these systems is through the Saffir-Simpson scale. What is the Saffir-Simpson scale? Well, it solely measures hurricane intensity through wind speed. So for reference, Category 1 hurricane is wind speeds of 74 to 95 miles an hour. Some siding can be removed. Some shingles also blown off when you see Category 1. Category 2 is a moderate with 96 to 110 mile an hour winds. Storm surge around 5 to 8 inches there, 8 feet, excuse me. Extensive, seeing Category 3 with 111 to 130 mile an hour winds with 9 to 12 foot storm surge, and Category 4 which is extreme with 131 mile an hour winds, 155 or to 155. That includes 13 to 18 foot storm surge, and finally, the Beast. That's a Category 5 with 155 mile an hour winds, 18 inches and above or 18 feet, excuse me, and above with that storm surge. Now, for reference, Hurricane Opal was a system with winds up to 144, recorded winds of 84 miles an hour, gusts up to 144. So looking at that scale, we're going to be seeing roughly a category, we're looking at a potential Category 1, Category 2 for Hurricane Opal, again making landfall there. Hurricane Melissa, however, with winds of up to 185, excuse me, and that's certainly a Category 5 hurricane with the Saffir-Simpson scale. The first named storm of the 2026 season looking to be Arthur. And coming up, Ryan Michaels is speaking to the director of the National Hurricane Center about the 2026 season. Here's a look at the names this year.
Well, welcome back. Chief Meteorologist Ryan Michaels spoke with the director of the National Hurricane Center on the 2026 outlook, and he has it right now.
Any signs or patterns that we're looking at across the open waters of the Atlantic when it comes to maybe El Nino or maybe even pattern tracks this year?
Yeah, we are expecting El Nino to develop in the Eastern Pacific and potentially be quite strong at some point later this year. That does tend to create less favorable conditions overall for tropical cyclones to form, especially in the deep tropical Atlantic, in terms of the wind shear and sinking motion that can make conditions less favorable. But in some ways, the Gulf can still have a lot of activity in years where there is El Nino, and that doesn't necessarily affect some of the activity that can occur at higher latitudes.
Are there any new models or new guidance that we're bringing into the season here this year?
Yeah, track forecast is generally sort of a large-scale atmospheric problem. So typically, historically, the global weather forecast models like the GFS, the ECMWF have sort of been the best tools we've had for forecasting track. But we do have new AI models that are also very good at forecasting large-scale atmospheric patterns, and they have shown some promise in track forecasting. So we are in the process of evaluating some of those models and incorporating them into our forecast toolbox. But I think it's important for folks to know that there's still a human forecaster distilling all that information here at the Hurricane Center.
But what about the new aspects of the Hurricane Center's cone this year?
Yeah, our operational cone graphics going to continue to show, or this year will be newly showing inland tropical storm and hurricane wind watches and warnings over the United States. We've had an experimental version of that for the last couple of years. It was really successful in 2024 for storms like Helene and Milton, where we had widespread inland wind impacts, and it was really good to be able to show the risk of those inland wind hazards on the cone itself. We're debuting a new experimental for the cone this year that's going to more accurately represent what our track forecast errors really look like. And a long track error, there's a lot more uncertainty in the forward speed of a storm in the Atlantic out at days 4 and 5 compared to other earlier time ranges. So the cone's this experimental cone is going to look a little more elongated, or what we call elliptical shaped, out at day 4 and 5. And we're also going to use the 90th percentile of our track forecast error. So you'll be able to say that the center of the storm would stay inside the cone almost 9 times out of 10, which is a lot easier to message than the 67th percentile we've been using for the operational cone historically.
And is there anything else that you would like the viewers up here in the Northern Panhandle to know heading into this upcoming 2026 Atlantic season?
Yeah, a couple things I'd like to point out. It doesn't take a major hurricane making landfall directly into your community for there to be dangerous impacts. The biggest killer from tropical storms and hurricanes in the United States in the last 10 years has been flooding from heavy rainfall. And that can occur regardless of how strong a storm is from a wind perspective. And the other thing to touch on is just post-storm safety. We lose almost as many people to post-storm fatalities as we do directly to the forces of the storm itself over the last 10 years or so. A lot of those are related to long-duration power outages and can result from carbon monoxide poisoning from improper generator use, heat-related fatalities, lack of medical access, just post-storm cleanup accidents. So it's a reminder for people to stay safe in that post-storm environment as well.
And as I just mentioned before, Hurricane Opal brought 9 to 12 foot storm surge here to the Panhandle. So it's important to know how to stay safe. Meteorologist Jordan Smith has more details.
Storm surge is often the deadliest part of a hurricane. But what exactly is storm surge? That is the ocean floor rising several feet into the air. The stronger the hurricane, the powerful the winds, the higher that water begins to go and pushes it inland. We're now at the edge of the sand, right in front of the dunes. Now imagine all of that water rising. If it gets over these dunes, which are about 5 to 6 feet, all of that ocean water is going to start going inland. And if you haven't already taken the time to evacuate, to move to higher ground, it'll be likely too late. It is very important to know your flood zone and evacuation zone if one is issued. You can go to any of your local official pages and you will find them there, because if a flood is coming, again, it's always best to be safe than sorry. You don't have to live along the coast to experience storm surge. Those powerful winds can take the water all the way up into the bays and flood areas around the bay. If the storm surge is within 5 or 6 feet, it's probably just going to inundate the beach. But if it goes above 6 feet, that is when it overtakes the dunes and can impact portions of inland areas.
And coming up, I'll be sitting down with the vice president of Florida Power and Light to see how they prepared for this upcoming hurricane season just right after the break. Well, welcome back. We're joined with JT Young from Florida Power and Light to speak about the upcoming hurricane season preparations. Now, Mr. JT, welcome to the show. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you,
us.
Emmett. Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I have a few questions for you. What is the prep process for FPL when a storm threatens?
Well, the biggest message, Emmett, I'll share, we love our customers to know and the general public to know as well, is preparation is so important. And this is the time that we ask our customers to be preparing, getting things ready around their homes and just being there, having their plans for their family and loved ones and elderly folks ready, so that in the event of a storm, you're not trying to make plans and preparations during a storm.
What can folks do in their own preparations for the possibility of losing power during a storm?
One of the things we talk about, of course, is in your home, making sure that you've got preparations ready, secured and ready, whether it's a storm kit, radios, batteries, flashlights, all the kinds of things that we've heard about before. We know there are a number of residents in Northwest Florida that have not been here during a storm, and so we want to make sure they're aware and ready as well.
How does FPL determine who gets the power back first?
So let me be clear. One of the things we can say is that we've invested and continue to invest in our grid. No grid is storm-proof, but we've made investments across Northwest Florida, strengthening over 250 miles of our main power lines to withstand hurricane force winds with steel and concrete poles. We've put about 90 miles of our neighborhood lines underground. We've done a number of things, beyond that with our transmission towers. About 75% of those in Northwest Florida are now steel or concrete. And when we go through the process of restoration, again, we make sure that our generation facilities are up and running so that we can actually get power out onto the grid to our customers. And then we also want to make sure that 911 centers, police, fire, hospitals, those critical facilities across our service area are up and running as well. And then we start focusing, of course, on our mainline areas where we may have retail businesses. But at the same time, we are also sending our crews and evaluators out into a number of areas across the areas that have been affected as soon as it's safe to do so.
All right, thank you so much, JT. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, Emmett.
Welcome back. We're getting ready for hurricane season, and joining us is Timothy Minnick, Emergency Management Specialist from Bay County Emergency Services. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Would you mind explaining a little bit to the folks at home what Emergency Services does for Bay County?
So we work with county leadership, all the municipality partners, schools, healthcare facilities, volunteer organizations, all to be prepared and to have a plan for this time of year.
Okay, great.
And I have a question for you. A lot of my friends that are from here, and a lot of people that I do know from just church locally, you know, a lot of them are still scared from Michael, still always talking about it, right? So what have you guys learned from Michael that you're going to implement now going into the future?
Well, it's not as, it's a continuous process, right? You're always learning, things are always changing. New technologies are out there. Utilizing different softwares, and that's for us upgrading softwares as well. But using social media, right? So for those notifications. But getting your news from a reputable source is huge, right? Because there's a lot of places out there that people will get on that's just fear, and so we want to make sure that they're using that. And on my phone, you'll find WJHG's weather app, and I follow all that. I had a notification a little bit ago while I was in the lobby. So just like I said, technology, things like that have changed, but preparedness, mitigation, and of course recovery is always a big factor in what we're planning for.
Yeah, messaging a very key ingredient to knowing what's coming our way and getting that from a reputable source is certainly something that you want to do. Yeah, download our WJHG First Alert Weather app. That's all you got to do. Search for that on your phone. You'll get the best messaging that way. Okay, flooding can happen sometimes when it comes to these storm systems. Is there anything that's changed or anything that folks should know? How could they go about knowing what kind of flood risk they're at where they are?
So it's a great question. Flood zones do change. I mean, landscapes change. And so FEMA updates their flood zones, and you can actually get to a map to show the flood zones on the county's website. So baycountyfl.gov, they can go there and they can see flood zone maps. They can also see evacuation maps for like storm surge, things like that. So there's a link there. If not, they can go to the search box and they can just type in flood zone map or evacuation map, and those will come up.
Wonderful. Timothy, thanks for joining us here for today, folks. Emergency services, great job you guys do for us here in Bay County.
Yeah, well, as they mentioned, strong winds, storm surge, and more, hurricanes can bring damage in many different ways, and most stronger storms are too risky to stick around for. That's why it's very important to create an evacuation plan now, before the storm ever may strike. Bay County has 4 evacuation zones, and they represent areas most prone to storm surge. Zones are based on scientific, engineering, and model data. Bay County officials say it's necessary to know well in advance if your building falls into one of the evacuation zones so that you're not caught off guard when it's time to get out of there. Here's what Senator Rick Scott said ahead of this hurricane season.
We should lose nobody in a hurricane. Nobody should get lost in a storm. If everybody will just listen to local officials and local news, they'll know when to evacuate.
And officials encourage residents in all counties in the Panhandle to know their zone. If you are unsure of what zone you live in, go to floridadisaster.org. Well, coming up, our final thoughts leading into this 2026 Atlantic hurricane season. Stay with us.
Well, before we say goodbye, let's go over hurricane kits.
Bay County Emergency Services leaders encourage everyone to get prepared right now.
Yeah, they say it's a good idea to have an emergency kit containing flashlights, batteries, non-perishable foods for all family members, including pets, and at least a gallon of water per person.
In addition, emergency services leaders emphasize the importance of staying informed to not miss any warnings or evacuation notices.
Yeah, and another way to stay informed, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and download our free WJHG News and Weather apps today. Be sure to enable push notifications to get the latest breaking news and weather right in the palm of your hand.
Well, that's going to do it for us here on this year's Hurricane Special. Please keep in mind, even though it's a below to near normal season, it only takes one.
Yeah, very emphasis on that. Well, thanks for watching.
And stick with us all season long as we track out this hurricane season.